You guys all set to go? Yeah. All right. Call the meeting to order. If we could rise, if you are able, for the national anthem, please. Madam Clerk, introduction of addendum or delegation items.
There are none this evening.
Thank you. Mover and a seconder for confirmation of the agenda. Councillor Wells, Councillor Desmarais. Any questions? All those in favor? That's carried. Disclosures of interest. Starting on my left. Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I have a conflict of interest on item number 9. Because I am employed by Sullivan Manny, the solicitor for Rankin Companies, although Sullivan Manny has not been retained by Rankin Companies for this matter. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor.
Conflict of interest, item number 9, as I deal with Rankins and pork over and quarries on a regular basis in my retail business.
Councillor Bruno.
Yes, Your Worship, with item 6, Planning Development Department report for the minor road development agreement. I have a indirect non-pecuniary interest as my daughter and son-in-law abut those properties.
Okay. Anything else? Perfect. We have one set of minutes, regular meeting of Committee of the Whole, 20-19, held on July 22nd, 2019. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Clayliff, Councillor Beauregard. Any questions? All those in favor? That's carried. Determination of items requiring separate discussion. Councillor Clayliff, anything? Councillor Danch? Councillor Beauregard?
Item 1.
Councillor Bruno?
Yes, Your Worship. Item 1 and item 10.
Councillor Baggio?
Item 1 and 2.
Councillor Desmarais?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Items 1, 3, and 13, please.
Councillor Wells?
None.
Okay, could somebody bring up item 6 and item 9? Mark, do you want to bring items 6 and 9 up for me? For the conflicts, thank you. Okay. Approval of the minutes not requiring separate discussion. A mover and a seconder. Councillor Wells, Councillor Desmarais, any questions? All those in favor? That's carried. We have no presentations. We have one delegation this evening. We have Sandeep Chera, Operations Manager, BC Investments Limited, operating as Storage Guys, Port Colborne. A request for street name change of Ramey Road, Port Colborne. It's found on page 7 of your agenda. If you want to come forward, please.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for your time of having us here today. We've been in business in the city of Port Colborne, our family, since 2007. Recently, our storage facility has doubled in size in the city of Port Colborne. As well as this May, we have acquired another storage facility in town on 945 Elm Street, formerly Port Mini Storage. As well as we currently own our business 20 acres off of Ramey Road, which is north of Highway 140. And we are here today to request a street name change for only the section of Ramey Road's street portion located north of Highway 140. There are currently 2 Ramey Roads either side of the Highway 140. And many of our customers get confused and end up on the wrong side of the road. With us owning majority of the lands fronting onto the street, we are requesting the name change, and we are committed to investing and growing within this township. We are requesting a name change to better identify our location currently, as well as our identity within the city of Port Colborne. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Gary?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, is this just to the presenter?
Questions to the presenter,
Sorry,
yes.
I'm fine, thanks.
Okay. Okay, great, thanks. We're gonna, well, there will be questions, so don't leave yet. You can sit down, but you don't have to leave the room.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, good, thank you. Okay, Councilor Bruno.
Thank you. I'm not sure to address this to him. Maybe it's Chris, the engineering and traffic. My concern is that, really, although the presenter's letter talks about 2 Ramey roads, in a sense there's 3, because we know the one Ramey road actually is blocked in the center of it, and you access from, I believe it's 3rd concession. Is it 3rd? I think it's 3rd. Yeah.
Third, yeah.
So I'm not quite, I mean, it's a rather onerous thing, I would think, for all those residents living east of 140. If there was ever to be something tampered with their street, the presenter talks about doing something with that end of Ramey, but there is also the pallet business that I don't think we've heard from or should hear from. I'm not quite sure if a east-west Ramey Road is in order or a possibility. So I'd like to just throw that up. Maybe it's less change, especially with Highway 140 signs. I just throw that out as something to throw into the mix. I don't have a particular recommendation without wanting to hear what others might have to say.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. I'm going to give this to the CAO.
Sure, through your worship to Councilor Bruno, I did talk to staff about this in advance of the presenter coming beforehand and wanted to take a look and sort of see if the city had existing policies or if we've sort of dealt with these requests on an ad hoc basis in the past. I do have some experience with naming of roads and changing road names. It can be a sensitive issue when many people are affected. Obviously, this is a situation where it's a little less populous on the road, but I think the city needs some consistency in how it applies its policies. The next request could be for a road that has many, many houses and businesses on it. I think the ideal way to approach this would maybe to take a sort of policy scan of the area, what other cities and towns are doing, and maybe apply some of those rules in Port Colborne. In the absence of an existing policy, maybe adopt some principles or practices that we can follow. In this case, maybe come back with a few relevant road names, whether they're, based on the road or just a denominator like west or east, but even sometimes that's confusing. One of the most important parts when it comes to road names is making sure that everybody who is a stakeholder on that road has access to emergency services. And there are some best practices around road names. For example, making sure that they don't sound like the name of a different road. And sometimes that east-west distinguisher isn't enough in an emergency situation for a 911 operator to send emergency services to the right address. There's other streets in town where this happens too. Elmville, for example, comes to mind, being that there are two of them with different Crescent and Court, I think. So my recommendation would probably be, and it might not be fast enough for the applicant here, is to go back and sort of look at establishing some best practices and then coming forward with maybe some names that council could choose from among, if council did want to proceed with a change in this case.
So before we give direction to the CAO, does anybody else have any other questions? Counselor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was just going to say, Councilor Bruno brought up said that it would be good to have other people make some comments on it, people that live on that street. So maybe if we can give notice that a name change is possible, that these people can then have their say, and we can listen to them too. That's all.
Okay, councilors? So council direction will be to give it to the CAO to come back with a report to us with regards to this road in particular, but an overall direction as far as policy goes for renaming of roads. Is that fine? You want a mover and a seconder? Can I get a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Wells, Councillor Desmarais, any questions to that? All those in favor? That's carried. Great. Thank you, Scott. So you can converse with Sandeep if you don't mind. Okay, under the mayor's report. So just one change for the Monday, August 26th meeting. We are starting at 7 p.m., not at 6:30. It'll be 7 p.m. So that'll be on our website. But there's a public meeting and the one consultant can't get here for 6:30. So the clerk asked me to say it's 7 p.m. Just remember that. So last weekend, Mother Nature cooperated with magnificent weather for our concerts, boat cruises, fishing tournament, fireworks, car and kite shows, museum activities, and more at our 41st annual Canal Days. I want to extend our appreciation to staff, volunteers, and sponsors who came through once again and made Canal Days a resounding success. A special thank you to their families who give up their parents, grandparents, sons, and daughters for the weekend while they worked behind and in front of the scenes to help us showcase our city. It all comes together with a great team. As we look ahead to next year, I would ask you to check out our website and complete the Canal Days survey before Thursday. It only takes about 5 minutes, and your opinion is important to us. So for those that are watching at home, those in the crowd tonight, please remember if you haven't done our Canal Days survey, please partake. Last Tuesday morning, we had a mayor's meeting with regards to governance. And the week prior to that, we had Environics bring their survey to the region with regards to the polling they did and questionnaire across the region. They will be coming to Port Colborne City Council and giving us the same report that they gave to Regional Council, so that's coming up. I know they're working with staff to find a date for that. So, Council, what you're going to receive from me this week, you'll receive an email that will have attached to it a one city report that was done by a business group out of the north end of the region. You'll have a 4-city report that was put together by the City of Niagara Falls, and you'll have the Environics survey, the complete survey that we received through Regional Council, so you'll receive those. What I will do is also outline many of the much of the information that came out of our meeting last Tuesday from all the mayors, and if you're going to look at that, because really going forward now that we've got all this information together, I think we need to formulate our unity on how we want to see things move forward. Most of the municipalities are starting to do that now with this information, but we'll get it all to you and then we can formulate that and bring something back and have staff bring something back to council in regards to a report for us. So make sure you keep an eye out for that, and we'll give you a week or two to kind of peruse through that. If you have any questions, you can contact either Scott or myself. The CIOs at the same time are meeting on the governance issue. So Scott can answer a number of questions that have come out of the CIO meetings. With that, that's it. I'll leave it short and sweet. Any questions? Seeing none. Regional Councillor Butters is away this evening. Any regional questions? Thank you. Councillors' items. I'll start on my right. Councillor Wells, anything?
Yes, your Mayor. Couple of issues. One, I'd like to thank Chris's crew, the after-hours crew, Some compliments on them. We had a bit of a smelly situation on one of our rural roads, Carl Road, where the farmer had, I think he might have missed his field and fertilized the roadway. It was quite a nasty situation, and Chris's individual responded to it very quickly with it and responded to it. And so that was one of the situations. And then the other situation we had on the weekend was that of the Pleasant Beach. Again, that continues to be a troublesome spot. Some people taking advantage of the liberties that are there. And I would think that we should address the parking issue there. And this is the one-night stand parking lots that are cropping up, where people are charging to park on their lawns and park on the roads. So we need to look at that. We also need to look at how we can control the beach a little bit better for health reasons. The gate keeps getting left open. I know we have a lock and we have a set of keys that have been out, but it seems like everybody has a set of those keys. So those are the two issue areas that I need to address and would like to address in the future. Okay.
Okay. Got any comments to that, Scott?
Sure. I guess through your worship to Councillor Wells on the issue of Pleasant Beach Road, there is, it is an issue that is a recurring issue in this council chambers. In fact, I was able to speak to 2 residents before the meeting about a number of issues there. Staff do continue to work towards solutions. Right now, there is legal parking at the south end of the road. It's in high demand, and some people are, I guess, overflowing it for all intents and purposes. We are working on a report from staff. It won't be imminent, but there is a report coming forward to council. We are always working with the region on improvements to the waste depot, for lack of a better term, that's there. And for now, in the absence of any different direction from council, it's really the status quo. To make something different happen, such as, and we own the property and it is legal for people to access the 66 feet. It is not legal for them to go west or east from that 66 feet, but we cannot stop people from going to the 66 feet, whether that's 100 people or 1,000 people, because it's a road. It's technically a road, even though it's made out of sand. And in the absence of any kind of direction from council, that situation will continue to exist.
Councillor?
There has to be some sort of a solution to this, some way, somewhere, or somehow. Is there a potential to commercialize that beach? Can Port Colborne commercialize that as their own beach, and then a charge admission to the beach, and then from that can control the beach, and you'd have staffing there during virtually all hours of operation. That way there would be more controlled, there would be more hands-on, I guess one would say.
Sure. Yeah. Scott? Through to the mayor, to Councillor Wells, I'm not saying that I've researched and or favor any of these options, but I would suggest there are options all the way from dividing the beach in 2 and selling it to the property owners on either side and not having it be a road anymore, all the way to building a parking lot and charging for parking revenue and using that money for security guards and janitorial services and washrooms and other beach amenities. Just on the surface, the issue with that, with sort of operating it as a municipal beach, is the small footprint of the beach. Because once again, 66 feet and with high water, and if you ask people to come and they come out in droves, I don't know if we'll have the amenities there to support that much beach usage. So I'm not sure if either of the 2 directors might like to add something.
Mr. Mayor, if
Yeah.
I may, there is an open file dealing with the zoning enforcement issue, so it is an open file dealing with the private property owners that are allowing people to park on their property for a fee.
Okay. Councillor?
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Dan, and your department blitzes that on the weekends as far as people that are parking on the road illegally?
Every weekend, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Demeray, any new business? Counselor Bagu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I got a few here. First one, just an update from Mr. Lee, probably. I've had a few phone calls, like a couple other councilors, regarding the railway crossing update on Sugarloaf and Elm Street, when it's going to be fixed. I know he told me, I sent the email out or phone call, but probably people like to hear just for information.
Okay, Chris?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bagu. We've had discussions and conversations with Trillium Railroad, and they have scheduled in for mid-September at this point in time, depending on the exact dates of when their subcontractor will begin to actually do the rail work. So once we know those exact dates, we will then get that out to council and give them a heads up on the timing on that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I got a few more here yet.
Yeah?
One is, I got a traffic safety concern at the west end of Stanley Street, which abuts into the new subdivision there. And probably best if I read part of it. They got a major concern regarding safety as a result of speed. There's currently no stop sign from Hampton Avenue to the new Lancaster Road that connects Stanley to Clarence Street. And people are being home. There's many families that walk. There's kids that go to school. I've actually been out there 4 times early in the morning, and I've seen kids go to school walking on. They have to walk on the road. I know we can't get sidewalks there. That's been an issue here with the past council. But what they're looking for too is, because of the bicycle safety, also not only Stanley Street but also Clarence, is some sort of traffic slowdown of some sort, whether it's reposting the 40 or what I'm looking for is staff direction. They know the best, it seems like, and basically whether there's a stop sign needed. I know that has to go for staff. Council has to bring it up, but basically most of it's regarding people walking on the road, and the cars are going by. And now it's a shortcut on Stanley to get on that road to get to wherever people are going for working in the morning. So if I could leave that with staff, and they could get back to the council whenever, or send a report in, I could send the reply back. I appreciate it. And I don't know who that goes to, probably Mr. Lee, I imagine, or CAO.
Well, it should go through bylaws.
Well, I guess, if I can just respond briefly. So through your worship to Councillor Bagu, any kind of an enforcement issue is going to go to the police. We have a fairly good relationship with Niagara Regional Police. I could take a chance to send them an email or a phone call saying, could they step up enforcement or do some radar or other safety patrols in that area. Any kind of a change to the built infrastructure of the city, traffic calming measures, and so on. Even a speed limit change would be through the engineering department at the city. It's been talked about before in this council chambers. It's sort of a broad subject, but our experience is that changing the speed limit sign doesn't always change the speed with which the drivers drive. People tend to drive to the conditions of the road. If it's straight and paved and wide, they'll just go as fast as they're comfortable going, even if it's not safe for pedestrians. So the sign might not be ideal. Stop signs, again, not a traffic calming measure. Most people who see a stop sign where it doesn't belong or isn't warranted, and I'll get back to warrants in a second, stop briefly or roll through and then go faster because they feel inconvenienced by the stop sign slowing them down. It's a common phenomenon of driving. Stop signs are usually put in place based on provincial warrants, based on traffic volume. And when there's not enough volume for a stop sign, this council can direct staff to put one in place anyway, even though it doesn't meet the provincial warrants. But that gets us into trouble with insurance claims and accidents that are in fact caused by stop signs. All of a sudden we've exceeded a provincial rule saying that there shouldn't be a stop sign, and it can create a safety concern, and it can create a liability issue, frankly, for the city. I know council doesn't like hearing the liability word, but that has been an issue in the past. If you do want to report on traffic calming measures, That's something that probably through a motion of council, we could direct to the Director of Engineering for this particular location. I do also know, and I'm not sure if the director wants to step in here, we did plan on doing a safety, basically scan across the entire city, and I'm not sure at what point of completion that is.
Chris?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bagu and the rest of council. There is a traffic study that is in the works. The consultant has yet to be hired to do that, but it'll address a number of intersections that we've flagged as being issues or that council has brought forward. We have been doing, as a side note to this, we've been doing some traffic counts, most recently with some of the requests that have come from councillors on other intersections. And when those counts come forward, which actually were just done recently, we'll have a report that comes through with those intersection and the necessity for a stop sign, if it is warranted, as CA Louis had indicated. So we're hoping that the traffic study as a whole will give us a good outlook and a good scope across the entire municipality. And if there are any other intersections that are brought forward to the councillors, if they can bring it to us at that time, we can make certain that they are addressed in that study and that they're not missed in any way.
Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor. So basically, if we could get the CEO to contact the police for now,
Yeah.
until the study's completed, I'm sure school is coming up pretty soon. So, a few more here. Sorry, Your Worship. I've got a few complaints regarding communication with our city. Basically, it's people calling the city, getting information. They leave 4 messages, nobody calls them back. And then he called me, and then I say, okay, I'll check into it. I walk up to City Hall, and I get the answer within 30 seconds. But these people here are not getting, I think, prompt or, service that they deserve. And I know we're rebooting all our customer service representatives, and that is supposed to be, I think it's still on schedule for September, if I'm not mistaken. But it's going to be hard to reboot people instantly, because I haven't seen an improvement since I've been on city council, to be honest with you. And I very rarely get a person on the phone here. I get a message, leave a message, and I get a phone call back a couple hours later, usually. But just for other people, regular citizens, I think I know who to call, sort of, but they don't know how to call or who to call personally. So they just leave a general one, and it seems it doesn't get communicated to the people. And I know the clerk's working on it and the CAO, and I would really appreciate it if we could sort of give everybody a little reboot in the meantime to take care of our constituents. And,
Just before going to your next
yeah.
one, Amber?
So yes, that is our goal. Customer service will be a project that will be rolling out over the next year, but this fall the phones will be going back to live answer. So the first step will be more like the switchboard like we had before, where they will answer and be able to help a bit, but transfer you to a person. But further down the road, they will be able to answer a considerable number of questions right on first contact.
So if Councilor Bagu calls, they'll say, "Oh, who wants to talk to this guy?" So they just shift
Exactly.
me around till
It's on hold the rest of the
Mr.
afternoon.
Lee loses that run, so he has to talk to me.
One
Yeah,
second.
please.
So, Councillor Bagu, through your worship, if there are these incidents where people aren't getting the service that they need or not getting a phone call back, if you could report it to me. I'd like to be able to look into it. We do have city policies about how fast you return messages, be they by email or by voicemail. I know that a voicemail isn't ideal for many, many people, but some of the jobs that we do here by nature take you away from your desk. I think you can reasonably expect to reach a person who does, accounts payable or accounts receivable, but the very nature of being an economic development officer, for example, means that you're away from your desk, hopefully developing the economy. But I would like to know if people aren't returning their messages so that we can enforce that policy. If I don't know, if I haven't been told, I can't sort of root out those problems. It is something I would like to see happen. I once had a complaint, just a funny anecdote, from a person who wasn't getting a call back. And I said, "How many messages did you leave the person?" And the person said, "Well, I didn't leave a message." So the reason they weren't getting a call back was because they had never left a voicemail, because some people prefer not to speak over a recording. they want to reach the person. But sometimes it's just almost necessary to leave a voicemail and wait for the return call, which should be returned within 24 hours.
I do know there are always two sides of the story, and I do ask these people, did you leave a message? Because I know there's, you know, sometimes, like you said, they don't, especially some old school people aren't comfortable talking to a machine. So, okay. The last one, finally, it's getting to deal with communication. There's things going on, example, Ward 1 that, you know, I give you an example, like the tree cutting on West Street that all of a sudden, Councilor Clayton, if I get phone calls, that they're cutting down trees on West Street, how come? And then we have no idea what they're talking about, so we can jump in our cars, go over there, yeah, they're cutting down trees, like, basically, well, to some people, a lot of people, it's a major deal. And I just think that the ward councilors should be aware of any work being done in that ward, or the whole city, you know, an email be great, you know, just so we know what's going on. And we do our walk-arounds too, you know, Councilor Clayton and I, we talk every day almost. We keep in communication, and we would appreciate staff also, if they're gonna do some major work in our ward or any ward, that you contact the city councilors to let them know what's going on, and we appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Scott?
Your Worship, Councilor Baggio, I hear you loud and clear. This has been a complaint that has been raised in the past by ward councilors. It is going to be prominently featured in our strategic plan if the amount of work that I've seen from the consultant is accurate and bears through all the way to the end. I know it's important. I think the issue that we've faced at the staff level is the difficulty in knowing what is of note. You know, we go into some, we come in first thing in the morning, we plan our day's work, and some of it to us isn't going to raise scrutiny or attract attention, blow up on Facebook. But lo and behold, it does for some reason. And it becomes, in retrospect, something that we should have told the ward councilor, but at 9 in the morning, it wasn't going to be a problem at all. You let somebody drive their construction vehicle through a little side area of a park to get to their backyard, and the next thing you know, you're being reported on in the media numerous times in an article. At the start of that process, it didn't seem like it was going to involve both ward councilors and site meetings and so on. So sort of, I don't know what the right word is, adjudicating or parsing out those issues is difficult, but I think it's something that all of the directors have heard in the council meetings as well as in our director meetings loud and clear. So hopefully for better service in the future.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Cliff, to that?
Mr. Mayor, through you to the CAO, is there any possibility, Mark and I were talking about this, is there a possibility perhaps that one of the two councillors for each wards could maybe attend the senior management meetings if just so that we had an idea of what's going on? Because we're thinking that perhaps a lot of these things are discussed there, and we do find them out eventually, but some of them are already been implemented by the time we know about them. So would that be a possibility, and just to have one of them?
Sure. Through your worship to Councillor Clayliff, you know, it's not something I've thought about in the past. My fear, just as having this sprung on me at this moment, my fear is that the very presence of an elected official at one of those meetings would change the tone of the meeting such that it would be more like this meeting than it would be like an operational meeting. Because as we've talked about in orientation, council sort of stays up in this policy oversight realm, and staff stay in this operational getting jobs done realm. And when you cross those over, things become a little bit more complicated, and you end up with a meeting that's probably like this, staff and council working on staff reports and so on. I do know that we do distribute those minutes to council members, so you can see what was discussed at the meeting through the minutes, but maybe we need to talk about some better approaches of getting that information to you in a more meaningful way and in a more timely way. So if it's okay with you, I'll not agree to that yet, but I'll take away that suggestion and maybe see if there's something that we can do at the staff level. Seems the director has his hands up too.
Chris?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to all of council. I think what you're experiencing here is city forces going from a reactive nature to a proactive nature. So what's happening is we're starting to tackle things that we're realizing we want to be ahead of the curve. In the case of the trees on West Street, is a good example, is that we actually, instead of waiting for the tree to deteriorate to the point where it falls and damages somebody's sign on their store or whatever, we've gone in and had an arborist come in and give us an assessment of the trees in the downtown core, and in a proactive way gone in and taken out the trees before they cause a problem. So this is us trying to transition to that. I apologize for that process, but we're learning too as we go along.
Counselor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Chris. I appreciate it. I know those trees probably all need to come down at some point. I guess I look at the fact that, do we have a replacement plan in place? And I really feel strongly that to take them down without knowing when they're going to be replaced or something's going to go over there instead. And I apologize to you because I intervened and had the 6th tree, asked them just to trim it and leave it. And with the hopes, they said, that one of the staff said to me that they thought it might be good for 2 years. And I said, even if we just know when we're going to replace them, and then they could all come down. I don't have a problem with taking them down. I just don't think that we're going to have a very nice looking downtown if we strip out all of the trees, because I've also been told there's a rumor now going around that you're stripping out everything down Clarence Street. So I've been asked about that, so I may as well bring it up now. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to have a mishmash again. And if we have a plan to replace them right away, I don't have a problem with it. But do we have a plan in place?
Chris?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councilor Clayliff. The city has a tree replacement policy, definitely, and as when we take down one, we replace it with 2. It's just a case of where we replace that. It may be in the same location. Both of them obviously won't go in that same hole in the ground, so to speak. So that's a decision that we'll come forward with and then present that to the council and say, okay, here's where we would like to put it. Here's the process. The funding is already in the budget for it, so then it's just a case of moving forward. Some of these trees, and the particular ones that were taken down, are really not an ideal location because there's not a lot of soil there. Because of the aqueduct underneath the road, they have no place to grow to, which is why they were failing. In other areas you mentioned on Clarence Street, now those all had a clean bill of health from the arborist, so I'm told. So those, I don't see any point having anything done except some trimming.
Chris, could I ask you just one more question? Is there any possibility that perhaps those ones on West Street, we could take them all down and perhaps have large potted trees put there, and then when they get too large, take those trees and plant them at one of the parks or somewhere else and just do a replacement piece?
Chris?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Clayliff. Yes, that is definitely an option. When we're open to any suggestions along the way.
And do we have a time frame when any of this might happen?
The best time to get the trees started is traditionally in the fall, where they can get a little bit of root work, and then they go dormant for a while, and then when the weather starts to get warm in the spring, they just start off and go.
So September?
So we would base that on the recommendations of not only the arborist, but our in-house garden people as well.
Okay, Counselor? Thank you. Counselor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. I brought this up before, but never really pushed it that much. And hearing what Councilor Bagu was saying, Councilor Califf, I mean, I'm wondering if we really need to sort of revamp the process here. I think most councilors consider themselves a city councilor first and a ward councilor second. People call me, they're not from my ward, I'm going to try and help them, I'm going to try and let the ward councilor know what I've done. A lot of the councilor questions may be ones that have been asked during the week. We want to get it out there to citizens. I'm just wondering if in a 2-week span, so for example, if they're going to pave roads in Port Colborne next week, they're finally starting the paving program. If someone like Chris stands up and says, you know, here's the things that are happening in my department going forward. The construction company's starting this date. On Carter Street, they're finishing and they should be done this week and removing all the pylons that rose up. So if all the department's heads are generally here and we ask, they have an opportunity to speak to that last. If they had an opportunity to be here and say what's happening in their department in the next 2 weeks, it may, when it comes to us, cut off questions that we were going to ask, so that balances out some of that time, but it lets even the non-ward councillor and the public know what's going on, and in some cases a ward councillor might not be here, but the story still gets out. And so I think it may be just manipulating the process a bit, and you won't pick up the truck that drove over that grass to get in that. But I think we also have to be realistic, that to adjudicate what we might be thinking or somebody's going to call into the city when it gets down to an individual level, I think it's just a guessing game that you'll never guess right enough to be satisfied. But I certainly think we could get some highlights. Like I recall, it was in May when Steve Shapowski's report came about the streets being paved. I thought they were happening in June or July. They might now be happening in September. I'd like to have a heads up on that before I have somebody call me and say they're paving on my street and they're doing this. So I think we could hit the highlights if we just, again, revamp the process. Perhaps the CAO and the directors could look at that. I think it avoids a lot of going to meetings and probably even lessons this speak here right now. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Councillor. So Councillor Begg is done. Any new business? Councillor Bruno. Councillor Borgard. Councillor Danch.
Just a quick one, since we're talking about trees on West Street. And so I'm strolling by the other day, and of course I'm a little disappointed to take down these trees, but if you look at the one tree, there's still 3 or 4 dead branches that should have been taken down at the same time. So now there's these branches. You guys are all worried about trees. They had a bucket truck. Why didn't they go over and nip off a few? Sure, tomorrow one of the guys drive by, and because I just happened to be walking by early in the morning, watching this, 7:15 or whatever. They need to go back and finish the job, because there's a couple dead branches that are gonna fall any time. Have a look, please.
Thank you. Councillor Clayliff, any new business?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Chris one more time. Could we get just a quick update on the Eagle Marsh drain? I know that there was some problems on the weekend. I had spoken with Peter prior to that happening. I had some constituents who were very concerned about it, and I again reassured them. I know that probably your staff were talking to them, but I just wondered if you could let us know what's going on with it.
Chris?
Through you, Mr. Bear, to Councillor Clayliff. Staff was doing some maintenance work and repairs and logistics and I guess you could say calibrating of stuff on Thursday and Friday. So some of the people noticed that the gates were open and the pump was running. We were exercising the pump and checking the float levels and making sure that all those parameters were met based on what we were hoping they would set to. They did check out on the weekend. The gate was functioning as the automation system has been installed to date. There are some other upgrades to that automation system which will send out some additional alarms. We're already getting the alarm sent through as we had hoped. So that's working well, and staff's been troubleshooting with that and testing it, which is why there's been an array of staff out there on and off different times. I would ask that the locals not get too excited if they don't see a body there right at the moment. Staff is monitoring it. They're checking the lake levels constantly. The system is alarming them. They know what it's there. So sometimes they're tied up in another job and they may not be there for 45 minutes after the alarm goes, but they know that the lake isn't coming up to a critical level. So they are being very proactive in that process. And there's one more piece of software that's coming into the equation with this, which will give us even additional alarms and details, which will allow staff to then monitor it even closer than what we are now.
Thank you, Chris. And I basically explained that to one of the constituents in the ward. I guess the concern is that he had called in a couple times, is exactly what we were talking about just now, and then he emailed me, and he had been out there 2 or 3 times, hadn't seen any staff, really felt that it wasn't being addressed as quickly as it needed to be, with great concern about flooding. And so, I've been racking my brain because I've been out there with these people, as well as several constituents, as well as yourself and Alana and everybody else. And I know what you're doing, and everyone's working hard at it. I wondered if there's any possible way. It was all over the weekend that this took place, and I thought, is there any way, Amber, that I know you're working on the service delivery model, and Mark and I again talked about this. When someone calls in with an issue and they tell something to the staff, is there any way that it could be put somewhere on our website so that you could quickly go in and say staff on site or work in progress? Because this complaint was about the fact that he had called in and that hours had passed and he'd gone back there and nobody was there, and he called again and he was told they were busy somewhere else. And he really, you know, and I'm just keep thinking that if there was somewhere they could just go and they could read, okay, the issue's there, yes, they did actually have it, they know what's going on, parts are coming. Just, I don't know if it's a possibility, but I just know that I'm not sure how to address it, because, you know, there were emails flying to all of us about it and phone calls and complaints. So I'm trying to come up with an option, some way that we can, you know, put it on our website when there's a major issue like the drain. The drain's up, but we're aware of it, we're working on it, so that they could just go there instead of all the phone calls.
Amber?
So through the new customer service project, we are working on a new website as well. So we'll look into seeing how we can get information out to constituents and residents easier.
Yeah, I don't know if it's possible. I just thought that way, you know, we could just direct them to it, and they could kind of follow, you know, what's going on, and be assured that yes, it's being taken care of, instead of calling around to everyone. And that was one thing that I had. And the next one, I just had a question regarding, I had a constituent call from Glenwood Avenue, and this is an elderly gentleman, and he told me that last year he was told that he would have some paving, a sidewalk paved at the end of his street. I think, did he say Hampton? I'm not sure which street it was, but it was right on Glenwood at the corner, and it's a 15-foot piece, and he was talking about when he snowplows in the winter, the difficulty. But he was told by staff that would be done last year, and then when it didn't get done and he called back in, they said, oh, they had finished their concrete work for the summer, so it didn't get done. So this year he called back in, and they came out and looked at it and said it was being addressed and it would be done in July. And he called me because it's still not done, and he's worried that it's going to be passed over again this year, and he'll be told that the concrete work's all been done. Chris?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Clay, I'll check with staff on the status of that specific one. I know there were some things that didn't get done in 18 because, first of all, our contractor didn't show up soon enough to get them all done. So some of those got pushed through into the 19 schedule, which is, a lot of those have been addressed already. But I will verify with them that specific location is on. And if you have an actual phone number,
I have a
if
phone
you can
number and
forward that
address.
through to me, I will make certain that staff can get back to the individual.
Thank you very much, Chris. Just a couple more. Garbage cans. I know that the new ones were up at the marina. I haven't seen any downtown yet. I just wondered if we had a plan. We had that money that we put in the budget this year for the garbage cans. Is there a date or anything that we can expect these to be done, Chris?
Chris?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Kalalev. That's actually a community services agenda, the garbage cans downtown. And my understanding and conversations with them after you and I had talked last was that those funds weren't approved in the budget.
That's my recollection.
Yeah, they were.
So subsequently, they have not been ordered.
Okay,
Budget's coming up in October. Bring it forward.
okay. Thank you. Next, I just wanted to bring, this is just a point of information to let everyone know that Larry Payton is riding in the MS ride this Saturday, and he's been riding for 15 years. It's a 40-kilometer ride, and he's an octogenarian. He's over 80 years old now, and he has done his personal best this year. He's raised over $7,000, getting close to $8,000, and just asking everyone to please support him if you can. He's a great guy, and he's been doing this for 15 years. As I said, his son was diagnosed with MS 16 years ago. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. And I also wanted to mention the fact that everybody needs to buy these pins from the Lighthouse Group. This is a pin that's been designed by the Lighthouse Group. Cheryl has done it. It's an original design. They're $5, and I really think our Lighthouse Group does some wonderful work. And Erna Rossi, who originally founded the group, I think that he's done a lot for Port Colborne, and I think that as far as a I guess you want to say a tourist attraction. A lot of people are out during canal days looking at the lighthouses. And I don't know if all of you know, but there's actually a tunnel from one lighthouse to the other lighthouse, and they're actually looking at getting permission to allow people to be able to go through the tunnel. So there's some really neat things happening out there, but we do need to support them, and I really wanted to thank Erno and that group for all the work that they did on the weekend as well for the Canal Days Festival. And last but not least, I played my very first bocce ball game ever on Saturday with Community Services, and our team, we did very well with the mayor and his wife. And all I wanted to say, you know, we had great fun. They were Special Olympians, and they play with their heart and soul. And if I can say nothing else, I can say that we can all learn a lot from those people that we played with. We had a great time.
Fantastic.
We didn't win, but we won.
Lost in the semis by a point. It was fun. It was good. Anything else, council? Staff responses? Anything today? Nothing? Nothing? Okay. Okay, consideration of items. Item number 1 was Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a motion for the city to become a living wage employer, whereas more and more people working for low wages are facing impossible choices, such as whether to buy food or heat the house, whether to feed the children or pay the rent. The results can be spiraling debt, constant anxiety, and long-term health problems. In many cases, adults in a family are working long hours, often at 2 or 3 jobs, just to pay for basic necessities. And whereas the living wage is the hourly rate of pay that enables wage earners living in a household to feed, clothe, and provide shelter for their family, promote healthy child development, participate in activities that are an ordinary element of life in a community, avoid chronic stress of living in poverty, and whereas the living wage for the Niagara region has been calculated to be $17.99 per hour, and whereas we, the corporation of the City of Port Colborne, strive to make decisions and take actions that have a positive impact on our community, our staff, and the people we serve. Therefore, be it resolved that the corporation of the City of Port Colborne becomes a living wage employer at the supporter level immediately, and that council directs Chief Administrative Officer Scott Louis to work with responsible departments to achieve leader level status at the time of the 2020 budget deliberations.
I need a seconder. Councillor Beauregard. Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The supporting information that I sent to council explaining how the hourly rate was arrived at and how to become a living wage employer will certainly, I would hope, address most of council's questions. But I've asked Lori Kleinsmith, who co-chairs the Social Determinants of Health Committee for the city with me, and Ann Coleman, who is the manager of the Ontario Living Wage Network, to come and address council and deal with any questions council may have. And they're both in the audience tonight if council wishes.
Okay. You're going to have to move to waive procedure.
Okay, I will do
Yeah,
that.
that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, so in order for questions to be asked, or if they want to give any more information, I need, so Councillor Desmarais will move that. Seconder would be Councillor Clayliff to waive procedural bylaw to allow the delegation to come forward. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
Lori, would like to come forward, please?
Hi, there's a little red button there. If you want to press that and just
There we
state
go.
your name.
Ann Coleman.
Thank you.
Lori Kleinsmith.
So I don't have a lot prepared, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about the living wage. And I will just say that the living wage is something that's good for workers, for business, as well as for community. And when municipalities take the step and show their support for the living wage. It's something that you're actually doing to support not only people in your community, but businesses as well. When people start to earn at least the living wage, any additional income that they're getting is something that's going right back into your community, and really you're supporting the business community in Port Colborne.
Okay, any questions? Counselor?
I just wonder why we have a standard in Ontario at saying 14 bucks an hour is acceptable. You guys come up with 18 bucks an hour. I'm a small business owner. I've got 9, 10 guys working for me. I don't want to say it too loud, but none of them are making minimum wage except for summer staff. To bring these people to an $18 per hour, the only thing you're going to do is increase costs. Everything rolls downhill. I can't say that way, but to say to somebody that, because you work at a city function or city a cleaning staff member or something like that, to make 18 bucks an hour, it's gonna cost everybody. And I hope people are willing to accept the fact that your taxes are gonna go up, because everything's relevant. And sorry, I'm not in favor of this one, but that's my opinion.
Councilor Beauregard?
I have some questions that are for staff, but I'll ask a question to our guest here, our presenters.
Yes.
So there's the supporter level, and there's also the leader level. What's the difference between the two?
Sure. So there's actually 3 levels of recognition for employers. So the reason we've done this is because we recognize that for some employers this is a really big step, and sometimes you need a little bit of time to implement the living wage. The supporter level of recognition is when all of your direct full-time staff are earning at least the living wage rate. The leader level is all of your full and part-time direct staff earning at least the living wage. And the champion level of recognition includes any third-party contracted staff. So that would be where those cleaning contracts and potentially security, food service, that type of contract would come in.
Okay, yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff, maybe Director Ms. Garrett, or to Scott Louis, our CEO.
Before we go to staff, we're going to do questions.
We're going to stick to the presenter? Okay, thank you. I'll wait.
Okay. To the presenters, Councilor Bagu?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I read this about 5 times, and it says other people are getting involved. Has the region been involved? Has any other municipality in Niagara adopted this, or has any municipality in Ontario adopted this, or are we going to try to be the first?
Sure. You won't be the first in Ontario. There's the City of Cambridge adopted the living wage program in 2016, and then we recently had the municipality of North Perth become certified. So far in Ontario we have 2. I have been having conversations with many different municipalities right across the province, and I'm not comfortable sharing different names until they're ready to express that themselves, but there are certainly other municipalities within Niagara region that we've been having conversations with. And I'll also let you know as well, in British Columbia there's about 8 different municipalities that are certified out there, including the City of Vancouver. So there's a number of different certified living wage employers in Canada.
Mark?
One more question, Mr. Mayor, thank you. The $17.99 per hour, that's based on the Niagara region.
That's correct.
Port Colborne is a lot different from the Niagara region. We're on the low side of everything. Population, income, and everything else.
Sure.
Do you have an actual number for the municipality of Port Colborne?
When we do living wage rate, we collect data on the regional basis. So we don't have it broken out in between different communities. I will say that oftentimes the smaller the community or the more rural, when a more rural area surrounds a community, their living wage tends to be a little higher because of transportation costs. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Clayla?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to you. Could I ask you a question? If you bump up your minimum wage to $17.99 per hour, does that mean then, from my other jobs, other places, your staff above them, would you not have to raise theirs? Because with union contracts and different things, you have to have so much space between all of your job levels. So my previous experience was when we bumped up the bottom, everybody bumped up all the way because you had to maintain the different levels between. Would that be how it would work here?
That's something that is more of an internal decision and your own kind of policies or whatever you have set. In terms of the Ontario Living Wage Network, our requirements for certification are that everyone's earning at least the living wage. I recognize it's not that easy, that sometimes you do have to take into consideration a cascading effect. But that's certainly something, if that's a concern, it's something that we always offer to help out with, and I'm not an expert in that area, but we can connect you with other cities that have done this or help with questions in that way, and we'll do whatever we can to help support you moving forward.
Okay, Councillor? Any further questions? Yep.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Representative. So you said that the leader level status, includes full-time and part-time. Does that include students as well?
So I will make a distinction here. If you're looking at summer students, no, it does not include that. If you are looking at someone who is working throughout the year and happens to be going to school, yes, we consider that a direct part-time employee.
Okay, Councillor? Councillor? Yeah, no, just for the speakers. Okay, no further questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question that might make it clearer for all of council to have a good grasp on the impact this would have on the city. Possibly Mr. Louis or Ms. Garrett. Ms. Garrett could speak to the impact it would have on the city as far as what the wages are now and what they would have to be. I don't think you're going to find that there's much of a difference at all entering in at the supporter level. We're pretty much there. Actually, I believe we are there for the supporter level. The only difference would come when we look to the leader level, and even that is not a large difference. So possibly, actually, Scott, you sat in on the meetings with me. Maybe you could speak to this.
Scott?
So through your worship to Councillor Desmarais, I haven't actually calculated the financial impact of the transition to any of the certain levels yet, but I can tell you that most full-time employees at the city do earn a wage that's in excess of the Niagara living wage. There are a few areas where we wouldn't, and that includes some janitorial staff at different facilities like Roselawn or the Health and Wellness Center. That includes crossing guards and some other some employees in those sort of entry-level positions and part-time positions at the city. I could quantify it by taking whatever direction council gives me and then figuring out what the amount is needed to bring those people up to the living wage. There is the issue that Councillor Kalealif identified. What you're referring to in that example is called compression, and that's sort of when, the store cashier is moving up to a wage that's close to the store manager. There's compression between their wages, so that difference of, say, $2 or $3 an hour becomes $1 or $2 an hour. I know a lot of different places that employed or that were impacted by minimum wage increases just brought people who were below the new minimum wage right up to the new minimum wage without changing the wages for people who were over it. The city has a little bit different rules that we play by, including pay by, including pay equity, which means in Ontario we have to pay positions that are female classed positions the same as their equivalent male comparator. And so we have an entire pay equity plan that makes sure that this is happening, and that brings with it sort of internal equity. And so that makes sure that the compression doesn't exist in non-union positions. In union positions, everything's governed by the contract, and those contract amounts are not likely to change by phasing in the living wage employer certification. Now, if we were going to go to the level where, the champion level, where outside contractors are included as well, along with our employees, that would have a bigger, different financial impact. And that would mean that anyone who's performing work for the city or at a city building would have to pay their employees more, the living wage or more, for the work that they're doing. So take, for example, the cleaners who clean our offices and library and parks, or roads building when it's closed. They're not employees, that's a contracted service. For us to be at the champion level, their employer would have to pay them $17.99 or more when they're working in our building. Interestingly, they could pay them a different wage when they're working somewhere else, like at a private office or a private business in the city. The other thing that's interesting, maybe of interest to council, is that wouldn't apply to people who are running their own business in the city. For example, Don Cherry's restaurant or the YMCA or Subway inside the Valley Health and Wellness Center, because those are a separate entity. They're not doing a contract for the city. The second part of your question was, sorry, I think that's the two things I wanted to touch on. Was there more?
No, I believe that was it.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, Counselor?
Yep, that's good.
I had Counselor Bagu next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You mentioned the YMCA, and if I recollect the numbers properly, they came back here last year because of the wage difference for the Ontario government. And basically, the lower people had to come at the minimum wage, and they had to have the distinction between everybody. And if I'm not mistaken, it cost us like $20,000 or something like that. It cost the city.
Right.
Because we subsidize the YMCA. You said we don't subsidize, but we do subsidize them still. And so for that, basically this whole thing, living wage, it's a great idea. I do not want to jump in as a city status at this time. We got bigger things going on in this city. And let me just talk, please. And the city's not in the greatest financial situation. We've already taxed people more from the infrastructure, the sewage, the water. There's pensioners getting actually decreases in their pensions starting this month because of a different, the federal government. And this is like signing a blank check. I don't know how much it's going to cost us. And I can't approve anything that I don't know the cost. So basically, I won't support this motion.
Okay. Counselor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. Try and concentrate on items that haven't been spoken to, but I will touch on one, and that is what I'll call the trickle-up effect. Counselor Bagu alluded to an example that happened at the YMCA, but I had the opportunity, and I'm not going to name the staff member, but a senior manager here, and asked them what they thought of this. And their comment was that they were making about 60% more than the current low-wage earners here that are part-time, but that certainly if they were brought to $18, which would bring them sort of to the 55% of that person's wages, that they would be looking in their negotiations to maintain that spread that Councillor Califf recommended. That being the case, that alone, I suspect that, much like police, a large chunk of city expenditures are wages. And if it is going to have a trickle-up effect that I think we need to hear about in a staff report, then I think this is a large amount of money. Further to that, what hasn't been spoken about, if you're at 14 going to 18, is we also have to remember that there is a CPP component that the city pays, a UIC component the city pays, a vacation component that the city pays, a WIC component that the city pays. And so it isn't purely just getting to 18, it's all of those other things. I think it's laudable. What I think we're getting into is much like physician recruitment. I mean, we're taking over a role or spearheading something that the province doesn't. If it was equal and everybody, and you know, the high tide raises all ships, I could see some some pertinent value to this. I would love to see that happen, but if it was, I'd want to see it across the board. And yes, it's fair to say somebody's got to have a leadership role, somebody's got to start the ball rolling, but I think we are nowhere near understanding what the implications of this are. And certainly I think the other one is that, you know, for, not centering out Councillor Danch, but, you know, for his employees, we're then in competition with that, whether it's for private employers to raise their wages or private employers who lose employees. But first and foremost, I think that before we can go any further, we need a staff report from HR. What are those implications? If we go to 18 with part-time staff, people are really getting effectively half a living wage, because if they're working 20 hours a week here or 23, they're really not at a living wage. Having said that, they're at a living wage for us. The thing I would be most concerned about too is, you know, if you start adding in people like the cleaners here that are from an outside contractor while they're here, they have to do that. I question whether that limits, you know, what cleaner we can hire, what's that impact, and how many more entities are there that we use other than an outside cleaning contractor. Like, I'm just so concerned that we can simplify this, but there's a lot of ramifications that we don't know. And I suspect that there's more questions than I've thought of and councillors have thought of here right now. I'm willing to deal with any proposal, but I want to have all the facts. So I would ask for a referral to staff to come back with a report on this. Thank you.
Okay. Seconder for referral? Councillor Wells? So you're going to refer to the CAO and staff? Or the CAO to direct with staff?
Yes. If I cut off other councillors that want to speak, though.
Oh, it's too late now. That's fine. Timeline?
Well, I think it's important that if we were to do anything or nothing that's before budget, so I'll leave it to the CEO perhaps to say, I don't know when we're doing budget this year. A lot of municipalities have done October, November, so I really can't give a date until I know when that is.
But we do. Scott?
Through your worship to Councillor Bruno, speaking to the treasurer this morning at one of our management meetings, she has directed our directors to have their budget information to her in the early fall, September, so that we can have a first public budget meeting in October. I did tell her that she could have a little leeway on that number, but it will be earlier than in the past. We want to have our budget done at the start of the fiscal year rather than having our first public meetings at the start of the fiscal year. We do have some software limitations that we have to work around, so that could change that slightly, but we're not going to be having budget meetings in March. Oh, I shouldn't have. I need you to delete those tapes later.
So on that basis, I would defer to the CAO to work with corporate services and have it at the very latest, the meeting before we start budget deliberations.
Okay. All right, Brenda, that's fine. Okay, Scott, that's fine then? Okay, so we have a motion to refer to the CAO and senior staff, and it comes back prior to our first budget meeting. It'll come to a council meeting. There's no debate. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Okay. Item number 2, Councillor Bagu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Engineering and Operations Department, Engineering Division Report 2019-124, subject Clarence Street Crosswalk, investigation regarding safety concerns.
Seconder that? Councillor Kalala? Councillor Bagu?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is a good staff report. I have no problem with it. What I do have a problem with is the bylaw enforcement that this council has asked twice now to pick up on that corner regarding the truck unloading zone where people are parking there and the truck can't get them in there to unload. so he parks on the street, and that reduces the visibility. I know we talked about this a couple times at council, and once the mayor was actually directed by law to step it up, and the businesses around that area have not reported any increase in any enforcement of bylaw. So I'm asking to add the bylaw enforcement to this motion, Mr. Mayor.
Well, we can direct staff to be more diligent. I don't think it needs to be part of the report, because we can do that just on an ongoing basis. So we'll make sure that we go through both the CAO and Dan's office to make sure that bylaws are there. Now, if they're out somewhere else and somebody parks there, and then by the time they get back, they're gone, if businesses can at least give bylaws a call to let them know, we do have our new full-time person in there that's there every day, so they can answer, call out to our bylaws when they're out, and then they can get over there and do this.
I have no problem doing, like Friday mornings is the important date. Friday morning, that's when it's totally congested. I've stood on that corner 5 times now on Fridays, more than the staff, more than the police, and I see everything going on. Most of these people not pushing the button. But
Yes.
for enforcement, all bylaw has to do is look out their window. They can see right there. They can see somebody parked there. Go down the elevator and walk over there. That's all I'm asking. Don't wait for somebody else to call here. You know, just do your job. That's all I'm asking. Thank you.
No, but it does help if businesses can help us. It's not just as easy as looking out a window, I'll tell you that right now. You know, they're in an office or they're in their cubicle. Unless you want to have them stand at that window and watch during their whole shift. But if the businesses can help us, all they have to do is call in. We have a girl that's there every day, and they can radio over to our people that are out there, then this can get done. Now, on their normal patrols, they'll look at this, but as I said, if they're out doing something else for bylaws, and they're not downtown, they don't know that that person may or may not be parked illegally, so.
Okay, Mr. Smith, thank you. All I'm asking now is bylaw make a Friday morning routine around the market square.
Yep.
That seems to be, you know, to solve the problem.
Okay, Dan, you can take that to your staff, please. Thank you. Further questions on this? Councilor Cleof, did you have any?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's not just a comment, really. When I look at the signage that's looking at being put up that Chris has put forward to us, I think that this will make a big difference. I think you'll see people actually slowing down. I'm hoping very much so. And maybe, you know, we won't have as many of the trucks pulling over because they won't really have the room to. They won't be able to. So maybe it will resolve it.
So, Chris, you gave us 2 photographs, one showing the posts with also the paddle, and one just the paddle. So I know in the report it talked about just posts. Can we work with both of these, or?
To you, Mr. Mayor, and the rest of the council, we can install both. It was staff's recommendation that we not go to the paddle scenario because of the width of those paddles. And because of the narrowing at the crosswalk already, we didn't want to restrict the intersection, especially the turning radiuses for the cars. So that was our concern in not suggesting the paddle.
Okay. Question, Councilor Demeray?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. To Chris, the picture you gave us here, are the posts going to be exactly the way these are laid out, this far apart? Because I think this is going to be incredibly confusing. I mean, it's already extremely congested in that area. This is just going to make it worse.
Chris?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Demery. If actually there's an attachment on the report, and it shows the layout of the posts with dimensions.
The number of them?
So it references where the posts are. It's slightly different than what that diagram shows you there, but the one on the report actually has the locations of them. Correct.
Oh, okay. I'm looking at it right now. Still quite a few of them, but it's not. So you're looking at about 5 or 6 on each side of that intersection.
5.
5, sorry, yeah, 5 on each side of the intersection.
That's correct.
Make my screen larger, okay. So 5 on each side of the intersection, which wouldn't be as bad, but I still think that this is a confusing way of doing it. I was hoping that there would be something different come forward.
Well, really, there's only 2 options, and the 2 options are in front of you. One is the paddle, or a combination of paddle and posts, or just posts. I've seen just paddles. When I was in Sheboygan, they used paddles everywhere, and actually it worked very well. Now, mind you, they've been taught all their life to drive that, and most of their crosswalks aren't signaled. People point, everybody stops automatically. Where here, traditionally the bigger cities have had this, even though it's been a rule in Ontario, nobody else has followed the rule. Now the last government came out with the lighting system that we have and the rules and regulations. So really we're playing catch up here. So, you know, I think it can be it's not gonna be there every year, but as we get people more attuned to stopping for pedestrians, that's the thing. The police did send us an email with regards to, they were there a number of times. They actually stopped drivers that were not paying attention to the lights, and they weren't giving out tickets, but they were giving education. The biggest thing there, people don't press the button.
Yeah,
Or they press the button and just walk before they look.
they don't wait.
So there's education on both sides here, it's
That's right.
not just drivers. And in fact,
Yeah.
the email that we received was regards that most drivers stopped, but most walkers didn't. So it was the walkers the day they were there that were more in the wrong than the cars, so. But it is an all-around education.
So is this, again, through you to, I guess, Chris, is this going to be a permanent thing, or is it being done on a trial basis? Like, just about how long will we be looking at doing this?
Chris?
To Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Demeray. The intent is to install these this fall. They have to come out before snowplow season, obviously. And then, depending on the reaction and the feedback from the community, we can install them again next summer for another duration. But the intent wasn't to leave them there permanently.
Okay. Councillor Bruno?
Maybe I've missed something on this, I think, but, so these two photographs for the gallery, that's what's up. If I came to this community and I saw that, I'd realize I've got to slow down to 50, and for some reason they're delineating traffic. I don't know that really, just I would have thought on the 50-kilometer sign there's something about crosswalk.
I think.
So maybe I've missed that by just looking at these two, Mr. Mayor, sorry if I have.
Only at the size of the sign, that
Okay.
be marked different.
All right. If that's the case, then fine, but looking at those two,
Can I-
Danella.
If I can pass this around, because this is what I saw in
Oh,
Sheboygan.
great.
And I'll start with Councillor Kalala. So everybody knows here.
Decided to be in front.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I can tell what they're trying to tell you.
That's the one I did. Yeah. And I did send this to Chris just to show him. Chris does have that picture. And so when I got the 50 mile an hour or kilometer an hour, when I understood it was more for sizing and what the paddles look like, so. Okay, so, Councillor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Lee. In one of the options available to us is there's option D. It says, as an interim stationing of traffic police officers on farmer market days. It says, and police officers, that would cost a lot of money, there's no doubt whatsoever. But what about police auxiliary? I believe they are volunteers and they wouldn't cost anything if, or maybe they do, I don't know, I want your opinion on that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Beauregard. What staff actually did was they contacted the Niagara Regional Police and asked them what their recommendations would be going forward. And these are the pricings that they gave to us to have an officer in that place.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Chris. So that would include a police auxiliary, or are you not too sure about that?
I couldn't be certain if that would include the auxiliary or if the auxiliary would actually have that ability to be there at that specific time.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Councillor. Anything else, Councillor? Any other, Councillor?
Just to your picture there, Mr. Mayor, is that what we're going to instruct the sign people to put on it? I mean, not state law, but that icon and words, crosswalk, that kind of stuff? Or have we not decided on it? Can we decide on it before the signs are made?
Chris, so the people that we deal with these traffic signs, they would obviously have a template for a crosswalk, very similar to the one I sent you, even though that's US. They would have their Canadian or Ontario version, correct?
To you, Mayor, and the rest of the council, yes, actually, those signs would be, that particular paddle sign that you see there would be created by the regional sign shop. So that would be the provincial standard that the region and other municipalities across Ontario would be installing.
All right. So in essence, we're going with a paddle and, you guys want to go, can you go with a paddle at the east end of the street? So instead of having a last pole, you put a paddle where the road widens, and then have a paddle at the west end of the other end, taking out a pole and putting in the paddle, because now you've got a wider area. Is that feasible? I
To you,
think that's
Mr.
what
Mayor,
council-
that would be our recommendation would be to put the paddle at the beginning of the delineation instead of at the actual intersection. Correct.
Okay. Is that all right with council then? You guys all right with that direction? Okay. Any more questions? All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Item number 3, Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief Administrative Officer, Department Report 2019-126, subject transit update.
Seconder, please. Councillor Beauregard. Councillor Demery.
Basically, I was really pleased to see the progress being made by this committee, and to get this report. It's the first one of its kind that I've ever seen, and I'm kind of happy to know what's happening where transit is concerned. One question I do have, though, would, and this would probably go to Mr. Louis, would bus shelters or benches be considered as a local service enhancement, part of the requirement of the city's annual spending?
Scott.
Through your worship, Councillor Demery, there is no real strings attached or restrictions on the amount of on how that budgeted amount would be spent by the city. Our sort of agreement, there's a sort of almost a gentleman's agreement between the region and the city, is that we'll maintain our annual transit spending at the same level, so that the amount of the city transit that they've taken over is actually incremental funding in transit in Niagara. So whether that's in the form of capital assets such as shelters or something else, even trail system, active transportation, or whether that's in physical addition to transit routes or a level of service increase in terms of days of the week or hours per day, would be up to council to decide. I would suggest that there's probably a policy decision, because we have the flag system, if the city wants to get into building that type of infrastructure. And I think that's something that we could discuss at the budget meetings that we have to sort of establish whether or not it's a change in the built infrastructure of the city. Because my understanding is, from a time before my employment commenced here, that was something that the city was not interested in, was actual bus shelters. But if that's changed, then I think engineering can be involved in a decision to add to the physical infrastructure of the city.
Okay. Thank you. I would actually like to put that on the table to have the various departments consider that, especially, you can get a kind of a double bang for your buck if there was shelters and stops right at the bridges, because those bridges tie up people in all kinds of weather, and a shelter would be ideal. And those would also be natural places for bus stops, close to the bridges. So that would maybe be something that could be considered. I would say that would be pretty wise spending.
So through your worship to Councillor Demery, can I suggest that maybe the Transit Advisory Committee members would bring that back to that table, and then maybe through that table to the budget? Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Item 6, brought forward for the conflict, Councillor Bagu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Planning and Development Department Planning Division Report 2019-127, subject proposed development agreements for Lawrence, actually it's Larry, Barney, 1628 Minor Road.
Seconder for that, Councillor Wells. Noting Councillor Bruno's conflict, any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Item 9, Councillor Bagu, again for conflicts.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Rankin Construction Incorporated regarding peer review for Park Colborne Quarries site alteration permit.
Can I get a seconder to that? Councillor Wells? Questions? There were a couple questions, maybe? No? Okay, these are for the conflicts. All those in favor? That's carried. Item 10, Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Your Worship. With respect to this item, Councillor Bagu's Niagara Center SME, which is for a project grant and funds for small and medium-sized business as it pertains to...
Can you just read the top for us to get on the floor?
Sure.
Thanks.
Member of Parliament, Niagara Center, SME project stream of the Climate Action Incentive Fund for small and medium-sized businesses.
Seconder to that, Councillor Beauregard, Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. The only question I had on this was when we received things for information, I really, I want to know if our economic development officer who is dealing with medium and small-sized businesses distributes this. I'm sure that it gets distributed via other means, but we don't have a report from Julian, and I'm not so sure it needs a report. I'm just searching for when we get some of these information items, does staff then parlay them out into the world as far as who under their auspices they deal with? So will that get out to businesses?
Scott?
Sure. Through your worship, to Councillor Bruno, sorry that Julian couldn't be here today. She's on her vacation. And I have not discussed this item with her, but what we do is we rely to a certain extent on some of the different SMEs, as referred to in this correspondence item, to their various associations that they belong to, whether it be the Chamber of Commerce, NIA, Niagara Industrial Association, and so on. But we understand there's a gap because not everyone is a member of that association, of those particular groups. So we try to use various forms, whether we have a mailing database, whether it's email, whether it's social media, to promote these when they come to us and do make sure that they get them. I can't say if this happened with this particular program, so I'll go back to Julian and I'll make sure that we distribute this to our sort of lists or directories that we have in the city of Port Colborne.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, any other questions? All those in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Wells?
And just one through you, Mayor. Probably to Andrea. Anyway, regarding the timing on this, my understanding is this grant came out in July, and we're now at the end of August, or we're approaching the end of August. So our timeliness on this for the small businesses in announcing is really slow, and I think if we have any of this coming in the future, that we need to be more rapid in getting out the news on this, because these are limited grants and they are only 25% of what they apply for. So,
sure. Okay. So, your worship, to Councillor Wells, I would suggest that when we do act on these, we act on them right away. You're only seeing them on the council agenda because of the council meeting schedule. But the other thing is that because of the time of the year that we are in for this election year, you're seeing a lot of things come in as federal announcements with a very tight timeline, as for political reasons, sure. Government agencies try to get things out and into the economy or into the public's hands for political reasons rather than the true economic reasons, I guess.
Thank you.
Okay. Further questions? All those in favor? That's carried. Item 13, Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Town of Fort Erie whistleblowing policy.
Can I get a seconder to this? Councillor Bagu, Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would actually like to move to amend this from being received to adopting. Just to...
sorry.
Doing it wrong?
No.
No. So,
CAO has a comment, I think.
Yeah, so through your worship to Councillor Desmarais, so this is Fort Erie,
yes.
This is Fort Erie Council, telling us that their city has adopted a whistleblower policy. It's I think, highly unusual that this would come through what are typically political channels, because a whistleblowing policy is typically an HR policy, an administrative policy that would be in place in the HR department and that the city management would administer. And we have one. The city of Port Colborne does have a whistleblower policy. It's where staff can come forward and report to somebody who's their non-supervisor some activity that, let's say, is not savory, I guess, for lack of a better term. That exists, that's in place, that's not something maybe that council knows about, because it's sort of, again, in that operational realm rather than up in that administrative realm. It escapes me why Port Colborne would, or Fort Erie would be doing this in the political realm and then sending a mail item to all the municipalities around and to AMO and so on, when typically this is something that would be done at the staff level and administered by the CAO or the HR department or so on. So I do want to assure council that this is something that exists. We would have the opportunity as a correspondence item to receive it for information, which effectively means we've got it and we filed it. To support it, send a response back to, I guess, deny support of it, or to make some kind of a staff direction, like I would like to also explore getting a whistleblower policy, but we do in fact have one at the city. And if needed, I could email it to council for their review.
Thank you very much. That would be very much appreciated to receive that. And that was my main point, was to take the resolution part of what they sent and to adopt that as our policy. But if we have one that's perfect, I don't think, we're very lucky in Port Colborne. I don't really think we're ever going to need to use that. But the fact is, you need to have it in place just in case. So I'm really glad to hear that. So I would
Keep it
just
received?
remove that and
Okay.
keep it for receipt. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Baggio?
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to add to that, if there's any other policies that the new councilors aren't aware about, can we have a copy of those too, please?
Sorry, I didn't hear. You want that policy?
He wants all policies.
Well, policies that are like this, not all policies, no, I don't want those suckers.
So if you could just let the CAO know which ones you want, if you can email him which ones you want, he'll get them to you.
So through your worship to Councillor, almost said Wells, Councillor Bagu, I think you will see that, and poring over the sort of strategic planning documents and working with the facilitator on the next steps in the strat plan, I think you'll see something about a comprehensive policy review and better communication of our policies as an outcome of that. I would sort of, to restate what I've said to Councillor Desmarais, you know, there are policies that are very much council policies, and accountability and transparency, code of conduct, you know, many governance policies, I guess. And there are policies that are very, you know, attendance management, very staff-oriented, very operational. And I think I could overfill your email and cause problems on our server if I gave you just about everything. But I think if we can be a little bit patient and get to that strat plan process conclusion, I think that will be the opportunity for you to see exactly what you're looking for.
Okay? Good, thank you, Councillor. Any other questions on this one? All those in favor? That's carried. Any notices of motion? Move to adjourn. Councillor Danch, Councillor Beauregard, all in favor? That's carried. On to the council meeting. So we have the regular meeting of council 22-19 for Monday, August 12th, 2019. Call this meeting to order. Madam Clerk, introduction of any addendum items.
There are none this evening.
Confirmation of agenda, mover and a seconder. Councillor Beauregard, Councillor Kalaleff. Any questions? All those in favor? That's carried. Disclosures of interest. We have Councillor Beauregard.
Item 9.
Councillor Danch.
Item 9.
Councillor Bruno.
Item 6.
Come on, I said Baggio, but it's Bruno. Yours was item 6, correct. Okay. 2 sets of minutes, the special meeting of Council 20-19 held on July 22nd, 2019. Regular meeting of Council 21-19 held on July 22nd, 2019. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Bagu, Councillor Wells. Any questions? All in favor? That's carried. I assume the two conflicts, item 6 and item 9, will bring forward. Any other items? Okay. Approval of items not requiring separate discussion. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Wells, Councillor Bagu. Questions? All in favor? That's carried. Can I get a mover for item 6 for the conflict for Councillor Bruno, Councillor Bagu, Councillor Wells? Any questions? Again for conflict. All in favor? That's carried. Item number 9 for Councillor Danch and Councillor Beauregard. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councillor Bagu, Councillor Wells. Any questions? Again for conflict. All those in favor? That's carried. Proclamations. Niagara Ice Dog Day in Port Colborne, which will be August the 30th. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councillor Desmarais, Councillor Kalaleff. Any questions? All those in favor? That's carried. One set of minutes, and that's the minutes of the Grant Policy Committee of February the 13th, 2019. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councillor Beauregard, Councillor Kalaleff. Any questions? All those in favor? That's carried. Consideration of bylaws. Madam Clerk.
There are 3 bylaws being considered this evening. They are numbered 6710-74-19 to 6712-76-19.
Any question, or mover and a seconder for bylaws? Councillor Desmarais, Councillor Bagu. Any questions to the bylaws? All those in favor? That's carried. Councillor Danch, motion to adjourn?
Yes, sir.
Seconder. Councillor Bruno. Any questions? All those in favor? Carried. Good meeting, folks.